Welcome to the Chaffin Church podcast. My name is Martin Holman, and this is my co-host, Joe Griffin, and there's another guy here who probably won't say anything the whole time.
Oh, no.
Just kidding. That's Ryan. Great guy.
Me.
You're a great guy, Ryan.
Am I?
You're not the blockhead that you said you were last week.
Well, according to some people might still use the term blockhead to describe Swedish people. It may be a thing.
We hadn't heard that. Did we hear that on YouTube this week? I don't think we did.
We didn't get any comments on it. But if you have ever heard the term blockhead before, we would love, when it is being used to describe a Scandinavian person, please let us know with a comment. That'd be helpful.
This is our 30th episode.
Our 30th episode?
It is. I feel like we should celebrate.
Wow.
Or we should just both say wow at the same time.
Yeah.
As in synchronized wowing between Joe and Ryan.
All right.
Well, we are excited about today's episode, number 30. If you haven't subscribed to us, I'm going to ask you to do so on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also rate and review, and go ahead and lie and say you loved it.
5 stars.
5 stars, right? It's like a Jose Andres restaurant.
I don't know.
This was my excuse to tell a story about my last weekend.
Okay.
So last weekend, my wife and I and the Dancies, we went to a friend of ours' wedding in the Florida Keys, but we flew in to Miami. And my wife, Carrie, has a love for all things Latin culture. So she's like, let's go to this restaurant by this world-renowned chef named Jose Andres. And so we did, and it was fantastic. It was great. We had all sorts of good things, and then they brought the bill, and I said, "What you talking about, Willis?"
Wow.
And yeah, I rated it a 5 out of 5.
5 out of 5.
That was the tie-in. There was a tie-in there. Thanks. What about you guys? You guys have anything interesting going on in your lives? I do have a Q question here. The most interesting jobs that you've ever worked, ever in the history, because a lot of people aren't working right now. They've chosen not to and to live off cryptocurrency. Sorry, I'm just making that up.
That is your explanation for the worker shortage?
That is not. A greater explanation is that people are heading off and becoming more entrepreneurial.
That could be as well.
All right. Most interesting job?
Yeah, or second most.
Second. Well, yeah, we won't discuss the first, but the second most actually was summers that I spent at a Boy Scout camp working there.
Okay.
And it was 2 best ones up there were waterfront director and also the archery director.
Ooh, sounds like a lot of fun.
It was a blast. Had a great time. It was a great way to spend a summer as a kid.
How old were you when you did this?
Let's see, I started when I was 16, and with the exception of one summer that I didn't work there, I worked up until the summer before I got married.
Okay,
So
wow.
It's quite a few years.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
What was the hardest thing you ever had to do during that time? Like, was there any incidents?
I'll search for a lost
We've
swimmer.
talked about this.
I always ask, I'm asking the hard, we're asking the hard investigative questions.
Actually searching for a lost swimmer.
Ooh.
We thought, somebody had drowned, but it was just some kid who forgot to take his tag off the board. And you gather everybody down and you're doing the dives, searching through the water to see if somebody's under the water.
Wow.
So that's a stress level,
I would say.
But all in all, it was a great place to work.
Nice.
So yeah.
What was your most interesting job?
Most interesting. See, I also had a summer camp that I worked at for a couple of years, and that was very, very good. I would say slightly less, although there were some interesting moments. But the two most interesting jobs I ever had, one was I worked at a plastics manufacturing plant when I was in high school. Actually, very, very interesting summer job my uncle got me. And yeah, there were some really just interesting people that worked there. And some phrases that I learned there that I didn't even know existed. No, it was
Probably,
really,
right?
really interesting. Like it wasn't like super dangerous in terms of manufacturing work, but there are a couple of moments where I'm like, boy, this is actually like I am afraid of this machine or this, super, super sharp knife that I have to cut this plastic with, all that. And then the second one, most interesting, probably, and this one is more interesting than that. I ran a boarding house where some Chinese international high school students lived there. And so I was responsible for making sure, the basics, like they didn't die, and that they made it to school and back, and all that. And we had a Chinese chef that was living there with us, and I gained a bunch of weight that year.
Those things happen.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to pay for said chef.
I did not have to pay for said chef, but eventually I said, this is actually bad for me, even though it tastes really, really good. So, yeah. So it was really interesting. I mean, a bunch of really just as you would picture, with that kind of, intercultural exchange going on. There were so many strange things that happened. like every day there was something to laugh about. But the one thing I remember the most was when I first got there, several of the students could not pronounce my name correctly. So Ryan became Ruan. And I then later found out that that Ruan is actually something else in Chinese. We don't have to get into that, but they were not mispronouncing my name on purpose. They were just substituting it with another word that sounded similar. So,
Oh man. Okay, all right.
yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Well, my most interesting job would hinge between, I was a DJ, and I wanted to do that as a career for a while. And initially, I spent a lot of time in college, in the fields of broadcast communications and political science, because I wanted to be the next, it was the 90s, God rest his soul, Rush Limbaugh. And so some of you will now love me, some of you will now hate me. Commence the conversation. So that's what, and I quickly kind of lost interest in that, but I liked the DJ part of it. And so I was a DJ up in Lunenburg, for WCMX, where Christ's Majesty is exalted. And AM 1000, WCMX.
Because usually when people think of DJ, a radio DJ.
Yeah.
Okay, but
that's what I was.
Good. Yeah, because I when I think of a DJ, I don't really think of like a wedding
or a club or something.
Yeah, something like that. Which I could not picture you doing.
So,
but I can't.
I bet I would be a good wedding.
Yes.
Wedding person. I don't know if I could get people in. My cousin actually does this. He's actually a DJ. He was on the radio, like a pop station here in Boston, and then that went under during COVID. And he moved in, and he runs his own podcast. Mental note: I probably shouldn't have him on. So I ended up, so he also does like the club scene, and I don't know that he does weddings. If he does weddings, they're probably pretty nice. So, or friends of his. So anyways, he's like that kind that like young people participate in his club scene stuff. And he's younger than me, but much cooler.
So Marty, I want to know about but the most interesting job you ever had, I'm assuming you're saving it for last, which is when you were the only human child in Santa's workshop, working with all the elves, before you made your way to New York City. And,
It was a long and arduous trip. I had to go through the 7 layers. Now, having said that, I don't know if you know this or if I've told you this yet. Tomorrow is the first day of Hallmark Christmas movies.
and I am, of course, referring to Elf, which is where.
And so, would you guys mind if we kind of got together some Friday and had a Hallmark Christmas movie viewing time?
I would rather chew on broken glass.
I think I'm busy then. Sorry.
I think I should have my own podcast focusing wholly on the movies I've just seen. And that'd be a lot of fun. However, I hear your sarcasm, your humor, and we're going to just move beyond it because we've had a lot of fun so far. Have a big announcement to make today. After this week, Ryan will no longer be with us.
I gotta go to the North Pole.
That's good. No. But seriously, what am I going to say? November 21st, we have decided, we kind of teased this over the course of the last few months, but November 21st, we will be having our Chaffin Church relaunch. And
There will be no explosions, no fire, nothing dangerous here.
we will not tell Ryan that we're doing these things, but it's going to be awesome.
Your family will be safe here. I assure you, it will be. No matter what Marty says, it will be.
Yes, they will be, but there also will be cool things happening. And so we're doing that. That's going to be great. Also, the 20th, we'll have a pastor prayer night here. Yeah.
Can we just take like a few? So what do you mean by relaunch? What is that?
Oh, that's
What's going
good. That's a
on?
great question.
Yeah.
So, Chaffin Church has been around since 1895 as a Sunday school union, which apparently these were things that happened. And then it transitioned into a church in 1903. That was in 1895, yeah. And then also coinciding with that, this building was built in 1895. And so in 1951, and you can go back and listen to our 4-part series, numbers, I think, 8 through 12 or something like that. 9, 10, 11, and 12 episodes. Our 4-part series on the history of Chaffin Church. In 1952, this room was renovated after 52 plus 5, 57 years.
This room, we are filming in the what would typically be termed a sanctuary of the church. Right
worship
now.
space,
Yeah.
auditorium. And so over the last 4 months, since June and the end of June, our team has renovated this space. And the background, you can go back to some videos early on and maybe see some of what Chaffin Church used to look like. However, it's completely renovated. It's changed. We have a new logo. In many cases, not all cases, but we have, a lot of our membership has been here for 2 years or more now. And so we are looking to show the community that we are ready to open our doors to the greater community and let them see, like, here is who we are, and let them see that there's life in here, and we would like to offer them whatever we can in terms of if they need encouragement or love. We want to be here for them. And so a lot of churches, when they start, they launch. And so we've already launched as a church back in 1895 or 1903. And so we are relaunching. We're certainly not making something out of nothing or starting a church. This is a church that has been in existence. We're excited about that. And yet there is seeds of new things. And so we want to be able to share that with our greater community. The people who are in here every Sunday or most Sundays should be here every Sunday, you know what I mean? As we'll talk about today. The people who are in here, they see it, but we don't just want to be about us. We want to open up to the wider community.
That is a great explanation.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. And so I wanted to make sure we shared this. And if you're listening, love for you to join us on November 21st. And we'll get back with you with the times because I'm kind of weighing some things. We don't have a lot of space in here. So if we have, more than 80 people in this room, it's going to be already too packed, and especially with COVID. So we're going to have to talk about times. I probably said too much there, which is typical of me.
But show up anyway. We're going to
Show
figure
up.
it out. We're going to have it all buttoned up. So okay.
Okay. Yes.
I was actually going to just say we should probably go into the next thing.
Okay, well, let's go into the next thing. Joe Griffin is here. He is preaching today.
That is not the next thing.
Pastor's prayer. No.
Oh, you mean this thing?
Yeah, that thing. Yeah.
Okay.
We got to do that.
So the other thing I want to talk about is on November 20th, the day before, we are inviting pastors from our community and anyone who wants to come, really, any pastor, to come into here and pray with us, and specifically for Chaffin Church. And there was a lot of years that nobody's fault, no specific person's fault, but as churches tend to do, at times they tend to lose their momentum, and really, really close to dying out as a church. And so through I think good circumstances and through God's leading, lots of things came together and lots of people have come together. By the way, not just because of me, but just other people in different situations, and an amazing leadership team has come together. And so we are just asking those pastors, and if you're a pastor, if you listen to this and you think your pastor should be here, we'd love to have them to have you invite them to come and just pray with us specifically for Chaffin Church. So that is on November 20th at 6 p.m. And our kind of core group hopefully will be here, and we'll be able to have some time together just praying for God's blessing on us as we move forward.
You did it.
I did it.
Here we go.
Wow. You know what? You need to be in church.
You can just wrap up right there.
Done. So we have a series of core values here, and over the last month, our leadership team, many in our leadership team, have been talking through this and preaching about it, and have been on our podcast. Joe Griffin is not on our leadership team, not because he's not a leader, but because he hates me, and so. That's not true at all. But he was willing to. He's very wise. This guy is an amazing, wise person. I look up to him, and lots of people do.
I wouldn't mind being like Joe Griffin when I grow up.
Right?
I would not mind it at all.
It's not wrong. You're not wrong this time.
Okay.
So he has a lot to say on a lot of different topics. Good dude. And so he is preaching today on, what's it called?
The importance of meeting together regularly.
The meeting together regularly. Okay. So Joe, it's 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Why should we meet together regularly?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's a good segue, I think. Or at least it's a segue.
Okay.
So let me start off
Wait,
by
can I rephrase the question?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Joe, come on. It's 2021. Why is it? Why is it important?
Why is it important?
Come on.
Well, because you can't get as much you can't build a relationship with someone if you don't see them, if you don't meet them, if you don't know them, if you don't spend time with them, right? You can't have a marriage if you're in separate parts of the world. Okay, you know, it's really about making connections. And so, actually, a couple questions I'm going to start off with, just to, kind of, and I want folks to think about this, is why does it matter if I attend church every week? And I'm sure people have heard this, coming to the building doesn't make me a Christian, any more than sitting in my garage makes me a car.
I hear that all the time.
I've heard it many times.
I think
How
Al
about-
actually said that in
Yep,
his message.
he did.
Yeah.
I can do life on my own. I don't need anyone else. I like my privacy. I don't want to let anyone else know where or when I mess up. I don't need or want your prayers.
Wow.
I'll fix my own problems on my own. So my question is, do any of these statements, do you identify with any of those? You know, do they hit home? Well, I do, and I did at least, because I've said all of those things, including the I don't want your prayers or need them.
Really?
There was a point back in the late or early 90s where my sister and brother-in-law were Christians, and they would have a chalkboard with everybody's names on it that they were praying for.
Wow.
And literally in their home, in my own selfishness and anger, I erased my name off their chalkboard.
That's spiteful.
Oh,
It is. Wow, Joe.
I was
You're hardcore.
hardcore, yeah. And erased the name off there because I didn't want their prayers. I told them I don't need their prayers. So that's the way I was thinking prior to May 10th of 1997. Leading up to May 10th and on May 10th is when I made my decision to follow Christ. That's when I became what's phrased as a born-again Christian. At that point, through my sisters and my brother-in-law and my other brother-in-law and other sister-in-law, Chrissy's on their side, learned who Christ was through their, love and respect, and just their leading. And it wasn't hitting me over the head with the Bible. It wasn't, pushing me to go to church. It wasn't forcing. It was just letting me see their life and letting me see how, they were able to handle some very difficult situations and walk through them with incredible grace, which they still do to this day. I see them go through things that it's like, wow. And yet they have incredible love and grace for those around them. So I realized after coming to Christ that, gathering together with other believers is really important because I don't know all the answers. Even today, as I sit here, I do not know all the answers. And sometimes I find that I have more questions the more I learn. So the more things I'll want to learn about. So I want to be with people who know more about walking closely with Christ than I do.
Okay.
And I've come to learn that there are three important parts of meeting together. Three parts that have helped me over the years, and I think can help anyone who wants to grow in their relationship with Christ. And I have notes because I will forget and just totally blank out.
That's okay. Is it okay if we interrupt you through this time if we have questions? Or?
Yeah, raise your hand and I'll...
Awesome.
Go ahead, anytime you want.
I don't right now.
I
Okay.
knew I wanted to be like Joe when I grew up.
Right? I mean, he had notes, guys. Come on.
So the first is...
Get that
Yes,
hand back.
Mr. Holden.
Joe?
Yes.
I think you're awesome.
Why, thank you.
Okay.
I do appreciate that.
Did you bring him an apple? Teacher's pet.
No, but he just said I still can't have his Bud Light.
There you
Just
go.
kidding. Just kidding.
Can't
He
get
didn't
my
say
coffee.
that. Okay.
Okay, so the first one, all right, for meeting regularly, and the three kind of key points I look at for when I'm talking about meeting regularly is, first one is meeting regularly with God. For some people, it's the on their knees in prayer every morning, for others, it's just finding us some quiet time. For others, it's knowing that throughout the day, God's there. He's always there with us. He's always there as part of it. And all we have to do is ask. All we have to do is just, realize that he's there and is listening.
So what does you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot,
Go ahead.
What does your meeting regularly together with God look like?
It's evolved and morphed over the years.
Okay.
There was a long time where it was, first thing in the morning, reading the Bible, and getting to know who He was. Especially because I was once asked before I became a Christian, had I ever read the Bible? And I was very smug and very full of myself and said, yes, I read it cover to cover, when I had never actually opened it. I did use the Bible once in a college class to defend capital punishment.
Oh man! Oh man! Wow!
And I obviously
That Noahic covenant right there.
yeah, that
Genesis 6:9. Come on, somebody!
that was definitely Old Testament stuff. But
By man shall his blood be shed.
and it was in a speech class, and I had to defend the capital punishment, and I did so, and I used verses from there. So for me, it's like I said, it's morphed over years. A lot of times now, it's clicking on a podcast or turning to a devotional that I like. My favorite for a long time has been My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers. He's a guy who wrote it back in 1917, I think it was.
Yeah.
And yet the stuff he wrote and the things he taught then still resonate with me, even today. So there's, again, it's evolved. So in kind of support of why I feel meeting regularly with God is important is there's a scripture, and Chrissy, my wife, cautioned me, don't throw out tons of scriptures because people get bored and you'll lose them. So I took her advice because she is also wise.
She is.
So in Hebrews 10, verses 19 through 22, this is from the New Living Translation.
Okay.
It says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, we can boldly enter heaven's most holy place because of the blood of Jesus. By his death, Jesus opened a new and life-giving way through the curtain into the most holy place. And since we have a great high priest who rules over God's house, let us go right into the presence of God with sincere hearts, fully trusting him. For our guilty consciences have been sprinkled with Christ's blood to make us clean, and our bodies have been washed with pure water. I hold on to that as, I can go into the presence of God with all of my faults, with all of my issues, with all of my, junk. And he's not going to turn me away. He's going to meet me there, whether it's sitting down in the morning, having a cup of coffee, or whether it's in my, drive to work, back when I drove to work. Now I walk into the other room and sit there.
Right.
But, or if it's, at any point, he's always there to meet with me. And I know that, like in this verse, it says that he's, we can go right into that presence of God.
Yeah.
With, and trusting that he's always going to have our best interests in his heart.
Yeah.
So it's, reading through the Bible, the prayer, devotionals. One thing I found is that when I have difficult questions, I can ask God to show me where to find the answers.
Okay.
And I find times to talk with him. I know that he's listening. Or I can just take the time to thank him. Because if I really sit and think about it, there are so many things that I can be thankful for in my life that even through difficulties as a kid or, any of that stuff that I've gone through, I can go through that and realize that he's been right there. And he's been there for the happiest times, he's been there for the most difficult times, and he's been there for, every moment of it.
Yeah. So you could do that without having anyone else around.
Yep.
Right? So far, that's where you're at.
Yeah. Because you're meeting with God.
Right.
Okay? You don't have to be in a building like this
Yeah.
to meet with God. God's going to meet you wherever you're at.
Correct.
But one of the things he does call us to do is to gather together. Okay? So the second one, which I also believe is very important, is meeting in small groups.
Okay.
So Jesus did this with the apostles, right? There were only 12 of them. They were all together on a regular basis. They spent a lot of time together, whether it was walking along the way, whether it was out on the water,
Yep.
whether it was in the boat. I mean, you look through the New Testament, you'll see that he was with them a lot. And he was even with them with Judas Iscariot, right?
Right.
So
Wow,
it's like
that's
he
good.
knew, Jesus knew long before, right, that he even was there. He knew long before that that Judas was going to do what he did.
Yes.
But he still loved him. He still poured into him. He still spent time with him.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, but I couldn't do that. I'd be like,
It'd be hard.
You're out. I don't want it, But he could do that.
Yeah.
So, like those same believers, right, in Acts 2, all right, so in Acts 2, during the day of Pentecost, right, they were all in the room, that upper room they called it, and it was in a house.
Yep.
And that's when the Holy Spirit came upon them. They were doing that because that was their regular thing. They were meeting together on a regular basis. They were meeting in small groups. They were meeting in, and again, 12 is not a large group. It's not 1,000 people.
Right.
That small group, though, became his people who then went out and continued to share the gospel, share the word of Christ, afterwards.
Yeah.
So, and they also, after Christ died, throughout the book of Acts and later, you see throughout the New Testament that the believers met in homes on a regular basis.
Yeah.
They shared meals, they shared time together, they shared their funds, they everything was, as a community.
Yeah. So let me throw something at you.
Okay.
We don't really have a huge small group system here yet. I mean, it's been kind of hard to set up one as we've kind of progressed through COVID. How could we get better at Chaffin Church at this? Obviously there are weaknesses here. There are holes but in general, what could people do to meet with people? I guess there's some obvious things. This is a two-part question. As a church, how can we be better? And as people, as an organization, how can we be better? And let's say we didn't get our act together as a church, right? How could people just step into doing this, what you're talking about anyways?
It would be difficult if the church isn't promoting it, supporting it, talking about it. It's really just a willingness to step out and meet with someone. Okay. Now, small groups can also be the one-on-one meetings, and I've always been involved with one-on-one meetings. It's been a hugely, is that a word? A large, important part of my life.
Is hugely a word?
It is.
It is? Okay.
Hugely important, yes. That is a common
I'm
phrase.
very challenged.
I actually disagree with that. That is not a word. Hugely?
Yeah.
Chrissy, is that a word?
Okay, continue,
Okay.
and I'm looking it up.
All right. So
We're not playing Scrabble, Marty. Come on.
I mean, it just seems like something.
So it has been a large part of my life. Okay, it's the meeting one-on-one. And I'll give you an example of how it started is when I first came to Christ. It is a word, isn't it?
Apparently, it's a word.
I bet it probably only became a word in the last 20 years. It
That
probably
could be,
wasn't
okay.
Proper English or whatever, but
Doesn't
sorry.
seem like
Sorry,
that.
Joe. Sorry
okay.
for Marty's interruption. Please continue.
Sorry.
You did it! World's best cup of coffee.
So early in my walk with Christ, I came to know this gentleman named Lee Truax. I met him through a mutual friend named Mike. And Mike and I were Cub Scout leaders together. Our sons were the same age. And so Mike had said to him, hey, this guy's a new Christian. you should meet with them, get to know them and all that. Lee took one look at me, and I had a pierced ear at the time, and he was like, I'm not meeting with this guy. He's got a pierced ear. He was like, ain't happening.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have any pictures of you with a pierced ear?
Probably not, no.
Are you lying?
I have no idea.
He is lying. He is lying,
Okay,
Marty.
Chris, we're going to need to see those pictures.
We're going to have a discussion about this at some point. Yeah.
That was a while ago. A couple.
Early 90s, yo.
Yep. So he didn't want to meet with me, but he did. And his willingness to meet with me and commitment to meeting with me started off, we started off once a week. We went through this program called Operation Timothy. And, it's a decent program. It really kind of walks you through the steps of, coming to Christ and really starting to learn. But it lasted for 8 years that he and I met.
Your meeting lasted for 8 years, or that program?
No, our meeting together once a week lasted for 8 years.
Wow.
Now, in the beginning, it was every Friday. It was every week. Then, we kind of, due to, family commitments, work commitments, it's expanded to every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then he had the nerve to go and move down south, and no.
Does he live there now?
Yeah, he lives down south.
Okay.
But we met regularly.
Yeah.
And it was a huge, important part of my life and in my walk with Christ, because I was going to a very charismatic church at the time.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of things there that, while had some biblical truth, they were kind of like gone a little too far with some of it.
Okay.
So it was a little...
Very charitable. Very charitable. I like that.
Thank you. Very charitable.
Now, Lee, on the other hand, would be described as a Calvinist. He just
wow.
self-described as a
okay.
Calvinist. He was, very strict, very, and we would talk about all these different things.
Yeah.
Talk about the differences. Talk about, where we see God moving, how we see God moving, how we see God doing things. And, it was huge for me. And, it helped me stay very grounded in God's word, to understand that, it wasn't just doing all the things that felt good. It was really staying disciplined to, what God was showing me.
That's really good.
And he was really critical to that. And from that, though, I also then had the opportunities to meet with other guys one-on-one. And some of them were for, just once. Others were for, a few weeks. Others were for months. Some were for a couple of years. And it was, it's just guys who came to me and would ask a question, and I'd answer it. And then that would lead to more discussion. And it wasn't that I was looking to meet with all these different folks, but it was just a matter of, I felt God was saying, hey, there's somebody who has some questions, somebody that you can talk to. And I learned from some of these guys as well, from different things. Like, I want to make sure I did. So I did skip over a part regarding small groups.
Okay.
And then the importance of those, where, they've been a part of pretty much every church I've been a part of.
So can I just stop you here? So
Go ahead.
So not every church has small groups. So
No.
just for our listeners, small groups is a pretty obvious, word, but when we're talking about capital S, capital G, small groups, what do you mean by that?
Capital S, capital.
Like proper, like
Okay.
like what?
So I'm talking about just groups of people who, regularly want to meet in somebody's home. Generally there's food involved, which for me is a big plus, because
Yep.
I like the different foods. And then it's about, either going through a particular series or just, asking questions, talking about certain topics.
Right. So it's partially programmatic, right? There's
It can
there's
be.
some sort of programs just in some of them, but that's opposed to when you're talking about the importance of small groups in general, you're talking about lowercase s, lowercase g.
Yes.
You know, literally groups of people that are small, right? So
Yes.
okay. All right. Good.
Yeah.
That's good. Good job.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I can think through all the years of different small groups at the different churches, including, you know, our first experience with a small group when we were at Fellowship Church was at the Leary's house,
Okay.
and then at the Walker's house.
Yeah.
You
I think
know,
I was at both. I think I followed you around for a little while.
you were stalking me, dude. It was
I
really
was,
kind of
yeah.
but yeah, it was,
I
they
just
were
wanted
good.
to be like you when I grew up, man. What happened?
There were plenty of you know, different groups, and there was also, you know, men's groups.
Yeah.
Okay. Currently, I meet with a group of guys on, well, it was Wednesday mornings, now it's Tuesday mornings. And it's done virtually because of COVID. You know, we're not necessarily getting together, and I'm also an hour away, and the whole, anyway.
Yeah.
So, so we do that. But it's what I liked about the small groups is, for the most part, you can ask any questions you have. You can bring up anything you're struggling with, or it's something you're challenged with that you wouldn't want to bring up in a large group setting like in a church.
Right, and that's
You know?
true. That's true at like official church small groups, but it's
Yep.
also true, right? Of, unless I'm mistaken, of unofficial small
Yes.
groups that happen with
One-on-one.
Organically. Well, the
Yeah.
one-on-one,
Lead through act.
Yeah.
for me, it happens even better because, you know, for me personally, it's always been difficult to extend a level of trust to someone else that I will talk about the things that I don't want to be, you know, publicly known.
right.
Things from, you know, growing up, things that, you know, things that have happened or whatever. You know, it's like, those aren't necessarily things I want to, you know, share with the world, but there are things that, you know, shape who I am and, you know, kind of, you know, develop your character. You know, one person had asked me about what it was like to be, you know, like what makes me a good dad. And I honestly don't consider myself to be a good dad. I'm a dad, and it's part of who I am. But the two people I learned the most from was a gentleman who was my scoutmaster growing up, and my father-in-law, Chrissy's dad. You know, especially from him, I learned what it meant to be a good dad by watching him with his kids.
Wow.
Because I didn't learn that from my own dad.
Right.
You know, he left before I was born. I didn't learn it from my stepfather because he just did not have the personality to be a good dad. So, anyway, so
let's move on because time is fleeting, getting by us.
okay.
So what's the third thing? You said you had three things.
So the third thing is meeting in a space like this,
Okay.
meeting corporately. Like
And,
we
and
do.
once again, for our podcast listeners, what does that mean? Space like this?
A space like this is a large meeting space.
I was
Within
actually very curious about the word you're going to use for this space because that's an ongoing conversation that Marty and I are having.
Well, the way
How
it
we
looked,
refer
here's what I'm saying. The way it looked before, very traditional congregational look, which I happen to love, okay? I do. I love that look. That I would call a sanctuary
Right.
because that's the traditional name for it.
Yep.
Okay? You had, you know, the pulpits and the pews,
Yep.
you know, and all that.
Caskets.
No caskets.
Okay.
Let me tell you a story sometime about my father-in-law sleeping in a casket. 'Cause you
Okay.
weren't there.
Oh my
But
goodness.
anyway, so that's what I would have called this space then. Here, I'm not quite sure if it's just a meeting space, if it's an auditorium, is it a worship space? You know?
I like worship space.
Yeah.
I
mean,
like worship center,
Worship center.
but
Okay.
it does make it sound larger, maybe perhaps even larger than it even is. But I like worship center. Worship space is good too. Actually, worship space may even work better. It's a little bit more ethereal, a little more crunchy, hippie, but that's cool too.
Well, I think there's room for both,
Yeah.
or maybe even
Perhaps there
any
is.
word somebody wants to use. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, it's the place where we come to worship God.
Right.
So,
Right.
You know, it's a worship space. It's a worship center.
And as much as I make fun of the term sanctuary sometimes,
It's that as
because
well.
it can be kind of tricky theologically sometimes, it does work. It
Yeah.
actually does work.
Which is a whole other discussion. I think that's a great discussion.
We should talk about that next time. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
I want to be like Joe when I grow up.
All right, let's
You've
move
said
on.
that several times.
So, meeting like we do here in a large group as a community, having the opportunity to worship together, to hear the word of God from someone like our pastor or other folks who have something to share, and you know, someone who's gifted in that way, and further along the path in their walk with God. And I refer to Acts 2:46 and Acts 16:40 when I think of worshiping together in a large space. No, I won't read those. Look those up. But I will read this part, which is Hebrews 10, verses 23 through 25, where it says, "Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. Let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near." So I look at that as, you know, yeah, let's not neglect meeting together. I have had times in my life where it's been like, I don't want to, you know, meet with a particular group. I don't want to necessarily go on a Sunday. Gee, I'm tired, whatever. I've got something. No. When I miss a Sunday, you know, and Chrissy and I have talked about this many times, you feel like something, you can tell something's missing. You feel like, you know, gee, I didn't get to see, you know, Angela or Darlene or, you know, Dave or whatever. So it's like, you know, there's people that you miss because you don't get to see them.
Yeah, that's great.
So, you know, and it's people that you can pour into because you'll have those opportunities by getting to know them, and people who can pour into you in that space. And so one example of just something that we had done back when we lived in Hubbardston, we built a barn, okay, in the property. And there were guys from the church who wanted to help.
Of course.
Some of them had
Your
never...
Amish friends.
Yeah.
A barn raising.
Ain't no Amish. No, but these were guys who wanted to learn some carpentry skills as well, because they didn't know how to do this.
Oh, wow.
They just were willing to learn, willing to help. So we fed them, we got together, and, you know, they helped, you know, build the barn. And it was a blast. It was absolutely a blast. And one of the things that it came from constantly meeting with people in a large group setting like this and getting really to know people is when we needed people there, they were there. They were there to help us.
Wow.
Now,
It was like a small group.
no, it was a big group.
Oh, okay.
But it was like the small groups where they did come together.
Yeah.
And they were there to support us. So take you back to December of 2012.
Okay.
Okay. At that point in time, we felt like, you know, we were the people that nobody wanted to be, because on December 26th, my father-in-law passed away. 3 days later, my mother passed away. So we were dealing with the death of both of them at the same time. And, you know, I was asked and had the privilege to do the church, the funeral service and the eulogy for both of them. And it was an incredibly difficult time. And I knew God was there with me, especially when, as I'm preparing for it and speaking to the folks at the funeral home, to see you, Billy, Steve, trying to think who else was there. I mean, there were folks there,
Dave Kane.
Dave, who, you know, it's like you look out and you see those faces and you realize that, you know, they were there to support you. You know, they were there to help you. And that was huge. You know, it was incredibly comforting to know that, you know, that at the most what I would consider one of our most difficult times, that these folks were all there. And, getting their hugs, just, their support was phenomenal. So the thing I look to is I say, if you allow it, the people you come to know at church can become your family. They will be there for you, and you can be there for them to support them. It's not that you have to be best friends with everybody, but we should all be working together to encourage one another in positive ways. Sometimes it's correcting someone, helping them understand where, they're not behaving in the best manner, or they're not, being the best husband they can be. But it's someone who's you're willing to encourage, support, and pour into them, and have them pour into you. I can remember a conversation with you on a hike at the men's conference up at Waterville Valley.
That's with Ryan, for those who aren't watching on video.
I think I remember that conversation.
It was a nice, we're off with a whole group of guys hiking, and you and I were talking about just some things that were going on. And, for me, it was fantastic. Yeah. Because I had an opportunity to spend time with you that I hadn't really had before. You taught me how to do, the soundboard and the music, ministry. Me who can't sing a note and can't play a note. So, it was an opportunity to give back to you in something that, kind of give you back something that you had given to me. So
that's fantastic. I know I wasn't there because you said it was hiking.
Yes.
Wasn't there.
Wasn't there.
Anyways, that's good stuff. Thank you so much, Joe. And what I love about this is you live this out. Like, you are there almost every week, supporting,
and
talking.
And get this.
Okay.
So a detail that some of you may not know if you're not around here often is that Joe quite literally lives in another
state. Yes. It's not like we live close to said state.
But he practices showing up every Sunday. Like, I think the dude is here more than I am, and I live 8 minutes away from the church. So
it's pretty crazy.
So
it's awesome.
If you are thinking of an excuse in your mind as you're listening to this episode, please put that away, because you don't have crap on Joe Griffin. Let's be honest.
Well, get to church. Here's the thing. When there are people who ask us, "Oh my God, you drive an hour to get to church?"
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's worth, coming here. It means a lot to us. The folks who meet here, the folks that we see every Sunday, they mean a lot, and it's important.
Our dear friend Angela Jimenez used to say, I don't think she probably said this. She probably got it from somewhere, but a church alive is worth the drive.
Amen.
Did she say that?
I heard her say it, and I was like, that's really good. And I've never heard it from anyone else. I just assumed she got it from somewhere else.
I have no idea. We'll have to ask her.
But yeah, so thanks so much. Got some quick Chaffin Good news. Do you guys have any Chaffin Good news? Anything that you want to share, or anything that's really cool?
No.
Awesome. All right, so Ray Rogers, his birthday. Did I say that last week?
Nope.
No.
Ray Rogers turns 73 today. Just kidding. Ray Rogers has a birthday. And only a short time after Ray, Darlene has a birthday. Darlene Layton. Fantastic person. Gets our coffee and donuts ready every single week. And then also a pastor friend of mine who I meet with every other week. And my John 17 group. His name is Kevin McGinn. And Kevin is a fantastic guy. He's one of those guys that, he's like you. He's like very wise, and always just sits silently like myself. And and then has a word to say quietly. It's really awesome guy. And then also Walt Muty. You guys know Walt?
Yep, remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we've had him on video interview here, and Walt's a great guy too, a pastor, a missionary to New England, and a great dude. So that's what's going on.
Can I talk about giving for a second?
So, anyways, yes.
Awesome. So the podcast is a product, a service, a product. I don't know, service product of Chaffin Church.
Yeah.
And so we take the time to put this together, but there's equipment involved, there's all sorts of stuff involved, and we literally would not be able to host this podcast or get it out to you guys without the faithful giving of our regular donors. So we were hoping if you got something out of this episode, hopefully you did, hopefully you got something, even one thing you walked away from it with something with, if you could pay it forward and give a little bit to us, so that we can continue doing what we're doing, and hopefully we'll be able to get better and better at it over time as well. So you can do that by going to chaffin.church/giving, or you can just go to Chaffin Church or chaffin.church and click the giving link at the top right. You can text any dollar amount to 84321, which is my personal favorite, easiest way to do it. There's also an app. I'll let Marty talk about that another time. And then there is the old school way, which is still pretty cool. There's something about mailing and the physical check and everything that is cool. So you can send those checks to 155 Shrewsbury Street in Holden, Massachusetts.
Thank you.
Good deal.
Oh, and those gifts are fully tax deductible. I have to remember to say that every week from now on.
Fully tax deductible. Thank you so much for checking out Chaffin Church Podcast. Really excited to have Joe Griffin here today, regularly meeting with us, talking about regularly meeting with us.
I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And this has been Chaffin Good News.
Now go and give some out.